The other day, I was in a cafe where I placed an order, and this particular locale has a large stack of magazines. And I was perusing them, and I saw the title of one, a pretty well known German magazine called Der Stern. And the article that somewhat interested me was titled, when translated, Do with me what I want, as opposed to do what you want with me. It's a switch of pronouns. And this article, Do With Me What I Want, basically was about the dark sexual fantasies of women. I don't find that particularly interesting, but I'll get into that in a bit. And there were a number of references to 50 Shades of Grey, and much of the article contained anonymous accounts of working women between the ages of 20 and 50 in Germany, talking about their dark fantasies and how they like it and what have you. And then the article went on to talk about what it was that motivated these women to seek this out and how this was very mysterious. And the women themselves justified it as having to work in a quote-unquote man's world, but wanting to return home to something else. And one pseudo-psychologist who commented within the article stated that, yes, what women actually want is a caveman that will listen to their needs. Now, this is very telling. None of this, of course, if you understand anything about evolutionary psychology, is mysterious. None of it at all. Though the statement, women want a caveman that will listen to their needs, is quite telling and revealing, because that in a snapshot tells you what this is all about. We all know that women have a dichotomous preference for men. They wish to have a kind of beta provider, though he need not necessarily be beta, but someone who provides resources. At the same time, they wish to have someone, as far as a copulation/reproductive partner is concerned, who provides good genetic material. This person often, though not always, is not so much a provider so much as he is a prime physical specimen and very dominant. And the statement encapsulates those twin desires. That is to say, women want a caveman who listens to their needs. The prime physical specimen and the provider who listens to her needs. That's not very interesting, and anyone, as I said, with an inkling of knowledge pertaining to evolutionary psychology and female psychology can divine and ascertain what that's all about. But since the article talked a lot about 50 Shades of Grey, and mind you, I've never actually read 50 Shades of Grey. I've just read the entire plot, and I don't want to put myself through it. And the commentary, and I know the characters a bit. And one thing that they constantly cited in the article was this fascination with this book by this woman who wrote it in her 40s, and how just tens of thousands of women, ranging from their teenage years to their 80s apparently, have written to this woman thanking her for offering written visualization of their desires and what have you. And believe it or not, I don't find any of this interesting. I personally have no predilection, inclination towards this sort of thing. I've been together with women who wanted it, quote unquote, rough. One very extreme example, this was years ago, almost 10 years ago when I was living in Berlin. I had to end it. It was a kind of pseudo relationship, fuck friendship. I mean, this woman wanted me to literally beat her with my fist. I find that personally repulsive. I know all men are violent brutes, but no, I didn't want to do that, and I promptly ended it with her. But if you look at the contents of this article in Der Stern, these women are just completely open. They say, well, what I like is being beaten until I have, as they say in German, blue bruises all over me, until I'm bruised all over. I like it when he takes the belt and whips me with it hard. I mean, really harsh, brutal stuff. And of course, that's their prerogative, isn't it? But I want to tie this in a little bit to something Barbarossa talked about recently about women owning up to the things they do and having a sense of consequence, action versus consequence. I think it was the most recent video. And he also posted a link to the CNN piece where they talked about this somewhat absurd continuous consent. Yes, that you have to consent throughout the sexual act. It's funny. It's funny because as someone who lives essentially as an alien so far apart from all of this, someone who doesn't engage in sex, someone who used to a long time ago fairly frequently, but has been away from it long enough to see it for what it is, it's quite kind of amusing that given all the difficulties now in the public sphere, I mean, now you have to you have to continually gain consent throughout the sexual act. Why any man would bother with this to begin with? And even though it's very well understood or readily understood why women have these dichotomous desires, that is, they want to lose control within a controlled situation, who in their right mind, what man in their right mind is going to give these women the time of day? Certainly not I. And I don't think you should either. Why would you engage in this lunacy? I mean, I don't know the consequences of engaging in this type of lunacy. Needless to say, one concern I had 9, 10 years ago when this woman who kept on migrating from spanking and hair pulling and hard pinching to beat me with your fist till I'm black and blue and bleed. First off, that would be literally criminal. I could be prosecuted for that. I could have been prosecuted. These women with these desires, why would you risk your own life, that is your sanity, your health, your freedom, you don't want to go to prison, for that kind of thing? And we see in the response of women to, say, 50 Shades of Grey, how positive the response in large measure was. Of course, you had the feminist brigade offering some criticism. Not a single man dared touch that. There was no criticism of man, and just imagine what would have happened had a man written that particular piece. I mean, he might have been thrown in jail for, I don't know, inciting violence and men to rape, and who knows. But I think the time has come to offer to women our equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey. It's not the actual equivalent. I call it the 50 Shades of Indifference. Why would you engage in this dichotomous lunacy as a man of providing to these women's fantasies when the risk these days is so high? I'm not only talking about pregnancy and STDs. No. I'm talking about the very real possibility that she changes her mind. And let's say that she wants you to beat her until she's blue. You can be in some serious trouble. Now, of course, you need to self-regulate. You should be aware of what the limits are. But why would you be involved in this insanity? You see, I think this is part of a bigger problem, ultimately. It seems very niche, sadomaso and all of that, and it might be, but I don't think so. I think it's part of something greater, part of something larger. The fundamental problem of why we have a gynocentric world view and social structure and perception and is, of course, harks back to our biological reproductive roles, but the continuation of that is something that rests in our psyche. And within that psyche, there is something that's alterable. That being the attention we offer women with our psyche, with our mind, with our psychology. You have no idea how much time, say, if you open up a book about David Buss's book, The Evolution of Desire, for example, how much time they spend on analyzing and trying to understand the female orgasm. Of course, the male orgasm is relatively straightforward. We're told that may or may not be true. But this grand mystery, women are this grand mystery. No, they're not. There's nothing mysterious about women whatsoever. More importantly, be it literature or media or day-to-day public life, women are given far too much attention. And part of the problem I have with, say, this politicized anti-feminism is that you're essentially giving attention whores the sex they crave, that is, the verbal sex they crave. You're giving attention whores the attention they need to keep on fueling their arguments. My policy, my personal take on this is pitiless indifference, and this applies across the board. You see, far more than just feeling insulted or feeling offended, which is a prime concern of women, the greatest weapon in this war, and it is a war, though not a war of violence, it's not a war where we brandish swords against each other. The most potent weapon is the weapon of indifference. Why? Why? Because women, their sole power lies, quite frankly, as we all know, in their bodies, their vaginas, their physical allure. They have nothing else. Generally speaking, not all, but most, have little to offer in way of intellectual content, in a way of ideas that actually map onto reality. And when you deprive women of your desire for them, that devastates them. There's nothing more potent than relaying to women not hatred, because people talk about this often. The opposite of love is not hatred. No, it's pitiless indifference. It's the kind of acknowledgement you might offer a grazing bovine whilst passing it on the freeway, right? You see a patch of grass, some white and black spotted cows. You turn your head briefly, and that's it. You offer them no attention beyond that. Women feel the worst when they are not desired. And it's the desire for the female body, ultimately, that drives men, and the things that the female body can offer them. And this is also why I ultimately argue for chastity on the part of men, celibacy and chastity, because therein lies the weapon of deprivation. There are articles such as "Do with me what I want" because of the attention lobbed on women. And women offer the attention to themselves. They try to make themselves out to be self-important. That's fairly obvious. But far more men. I mean, of course, no man in his right mind with a conscience for his public appearance, his public airs, is going to make a comment about this sort of thing. No, this is the realm of women. Men can't talk about this sort of topic. That's why you didn't have any male commenters on, or commentators on, the topic of 50 Shades of Grey. No, it's all women. Depriving women of this desire that you have for them, is the most potent weapon of all. Imagine if men en masse just quietly went their own way, attended to their hobbies, regarded women en masse as the grazing bovines which they effectively are. That would be interesting. You wouldn't argue with a feminist. You wouldn't listen to their din. No, they would be lost in the din of their own voices. That would be interesting. It's kind of a Gandhi-esque form of passive aggression, isn't it? But it's a form of passive aggression that could actually work. People say, well, you have to fight feminism. You have to argue against them. Oh, maybe, but we see what that's done. But quietly walking away from the plantation, quietly walking away from the battlefield, whilst in spirit remaining on the battlefield, that seems to me far more effective. And more to the point, why would you engage in this sexual lunacy that so many women desire, it seems? I've had my experiences, I can attest to it. And if the words be true, if, in fact, tens of thousands of women had written to the author of 50 Shades of Grey in response, positive response, of how she described and illustrated their innermost desires, and they were so thankful to her, I don't think you need any more reason not to engage in this sort of thing. Of course, that's not to say that all women like being beaten and abused within a controlled environment, controlled sexual environment, but more importantly, like as I said, taking away that desire that you have can be the most devastating tool in this cultural war that we have. If we want to disempower the gynocentric model that runs effectively everything from consumption to politics to day-to-day interaction, the best way is one of passive indifference. Now, of course, this is in part my large issue with PUAs because they spend much of their time chasing the grazing bovines. And I find it puzzle worthy why they do it, though I comprehend the reasons, but they don't understand how they're continually offering power to this. Of course, I understand their own perception. The PUA looks at himself as a looter in the war. He's garnering for himself the last of the loot, the booty, literally the booty and the booty, the goods, the spoils of war. As the world falls apart, as the war tears the world apart, he is getting the booty and the loot for himself. Well, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. But in an ideal world, I'd like to win the war. And winning the war means depriving the enemy of its weapons. Sexual allure is the primary, the only weapon of women, although they might have some secondary ones, which I'll talk about at a later date. Depriving women of that allows men much greater freedom. If women, for example, want to call all men rapists and want to call for bizarre action or laws which state that you have to be engaged in continual consent during the sexual act, if women want to be beaten blue during sex, apparently, disengage. Move away from it, do your own thing, go your own way. Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself at risk? I want to win this war, in a metaphorical sense, in a real sense, though I think the victory, if ever achieved, would not come within my lifetime. But I think the approach of abstinence is one, and pitiless indifference is one that can win this war. If you want to have sex with women, that's fine, but now know the risks. Now know how the kind of lunacy, the kind of dichotomous insanity that women desire. And more importantly, they desire that you understand that you appeal to that you cave into it. The choice is yours. You're free to do that, of course, but this is becoming more and more insane. It's becoming more and more vicious. I'm glad that I didn't go through with the kinds of things that this woman wanted me to do back then. And we should all consider collectively as men the consequences of this. And we should also consider the attention we lob on these grazing bovines. There is no need to do this anymore. We know how absurd this has become. And quite frankly, for those of you who partaken, you know there are a lot greater pleasures out there than merely fucking a woman. And especially if you're not the kind who likes to beat women during sex, as women apparently to some large degree want, why would you do that? Disengage. Pitiless indifference. Drive past the grazing bovines and leave it at that. That's all I have to say about this for now. Take care.